Fossils are a record of past life on Earth. They're really, in many ways, the only record that we have of ancient life on Earth.
I was carving into a stone. There was a piece that fell away that had the most beautiful shell still in it, and it began the kind of a story or a pathway of curiosity just to the forms that inhabited my material. Marble is geologically compressed limestone. All that history or all those forms exist in it. It's the essential graveyard.
We invited Christopher Beard, who's a paleontologist at the University of Kansas, and Elizabeth Turk, who's a sculptor, to have a public conversation. So the MacArthur Dialogue was really this great opportunity for us to bring together two very different practitioners, both of whom are working with materials that are the product of deep geological time. This is all part of the Integrated Arts Research Initiative, in which artists are in conversation with researchers across the sciences and humanities from the conception of an inquiry.
If I'm looking for an extreme structure and removing everything so that I can have a conversation about what's no longer there with just the remnant of what is, I have to go back and look at these kinds of structures that will live through the weight of time.
An idea that's really interesting for us to explore is this concept of morphospace, and so you can think of it as kind of a 3D potential cloud of possibilities. What becomes clear as soon as you start studying this concept is that not the entire cloud of potential morphospace ever gets filled. I think that for animals that are evolving through time, it turns out that there are just inherent limitations on what biology can do. There's a lot of flexibility in evolution, but there's also constraint. I think the same concept probably works for people that are sculptors. There's just some things that you just can't get at it because of the physical limitations of the medium that you're working in.
So one of the interesting things that sort of unfolded was we were taking objects out of the context of the Biodiversity Institute, and we were bringing them into the exhibitionary mode of the art museum. And this context obviously changes the way the objects are read and what they signify. And so the conversation in some ways became also about what kind of knowledges are our institutions proliferating, and how might we think about making new knowledge in different kinds of ways.
Chris was showing me how they worked and where they worked and how they housed the collection. It was one of the first times that I really thought about not only the discovery of meaning, but who was making that discovery and the lens, the context with which they were looking at those pieces.
KU's role in the history and especially the founding of vertebrate paleontology in America is right up there with any other institution, including the big East Coast institutions. By the 1870s, we had scientists from KU going out, collecting fossils, bringing them back, and that at some level was the very beginning of the Biodiversity Institute and its collections at the University of Kansas. And so a lot of the images that we have of this interval of time is often glass negatives and things like that, showing the field parties. Interestingly enough, there are even stories about this gold rush mentality was competitive enough that different groups of paleontologists would often compete for the very same fossil locality, and sometimes shots were fired.
You saw the images and the pride of these early paleontologists saddled over enormous bones, or you had this feeling that if you just went out in a field, you would have these instant discoveries. And there was such a aura to that context that really struck me. Just the information that was coming through their hands that would change the world, that would challenge religion, that would go out and become a foundation for so much of how we interpret life and our being.
At the last minute before the public dialogue, Elizabeth ran back over to the Biodiversity Institute and grabbed these antique glass slides of paleontologists and the fossils that they'd been finding and arranged them among the objects in the cases.
I wanted to bring that to the forefront. So it was a quiet way to be confrontational.
Our interest in transdisciplinary inquiry is not in producing something additive, but rather something transformative. And so if we're really interested in this experiment of producing new knowledge, then we're necessarily interested in the transformation of the institution that proliferates that knowledge as well. The Integrated Arts Research Initiative is a way for us to take the kind of work we can do with the MacArthur Dialogue and extend it over a longer period of time so that we can make real contributions to the production of new knowledge.